And Inspector Calls is set in 1912, and it starts with the wealthy Berlin family celebrating Sheila's engagement to an upper-class man named Gerald Croft. Their dinner is interrupted by Inspector Gould, who informs them that a young woman called Eva Smith has died by suicide. To their amazement, the inspector tells them that every single one of them had a role to play in the woman's death. Each character is obviously shocked, but slowly they start to realize the fact that every single action we take within society has a significant impact on others. The play tackles themes like social responsibility and class divide, and I'm going to dive into each theme while carrying my team on Rainbow Six Siege. The theme of social responsibility is a major focus in Inspector Calls. Priestley emphasizes how every action has consequences, often beyond what we realize. Inspector Gould challenges each character to confront their role in Eva Smith's death, forcing them to face their own moral shortcomings. Through this, Priestley urges not just the characters, but also the audience to recognize their social duty, to care for others and understand that neglecting responsibility can cause real harm. This is Inspector Gould's moral message to the Berlins. The metaphor "members of one body" reinforces the idea that society functions like a single organism. When one part is hurt, the whole suffers. It's a direct challenge to the selfishness of Mr. Berling, suggesting that we share a mutual responsibility. The anaphora, which is the repetition of "we," emphasizes unity and collective responsibility, contrasting sharply with Mr. Berling's individualistic and capitalist mindset. By the way, Priestley also uses dramatic irony here to make Mr. Berling appear ridiculous. Because remember how I said the play was set in 1912? Well, early on in the play, Mr. Berling confidently asserts that the Titanic is unsinkable. Absolutely unsinkable, that's what he says. And he predicts that the war will never happen. Well, the audience, who knows both events did occur, sees Berling as pompous and misguided. This irony undermines Berling's credibility, and it also positions him as a character of stubborn ignorance and arrogance. So when Gould delivers his speech about social responsibility, it gains more authority in contrast to Mr. Berling's flawed, self-centered views, showcasing Priestley's endorsement of community and moral accountability over individual greed. Inspector Gould's closing warning is a powerful moment in the play. The language here is intense and it's almost prophetic, as Gould foresees the consequences of ignoring social responsibility. Fire and blood and anguish is vivid and emotive, evoking images of destruction and suffering, possibly referencing the impending world wars that the audience would recognize. The tricolon, which is a list of 3, fire, blood and anguish, is a rhetorical device that heightens the drama and urgency of Gould's message. The inspector's warning is not just directed at the Berlings. It's Priestley's way of reaching out to the audience as well, urging them to learn from the past. The imagery of fire and blood is striking. It alludes to the violence, pain and chaos of war, implying that if society doesn't embrace collective responsibility, it will inevitably lead to widespread suffering. This line also reflects the theme of consequences, not just personal consequences for the Berlings, but societal ones. Priestley uses dramatic irony here. Since the play was written in 1945 but set in 1912, the audience already knows that the world has already gone through 2 world wars, so this adds weight to the inspector's words, because it suggests that ignoring social responsibility can lead to catastrophic real-world consequences. The apocalyptic language acts as a final plea for the audience to reconsider their own moral compass and avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. Now we need to talk about class divide in Inspector Calls. Priestley makes a clear point about the social inequality between the wealthy and the working class. The Berlings are an upper-class family, and their status allows them to exert power over those like Eva Smith, who represents the working class. Throughout the play, we see how the family's privilege blinds them to the struggles of people below their social standing. And Priestley uses this divide to critique how class can influence people's attitudes and actions. Mrs. Berling's dismissal of Eva with the phrase "that class" shows just how deep her prejudice runs. She sees Eva as beneath her, not worthy of empathy or respect. By grouping her into that class, Mrs. Berling reinforces the idea of class as a barrier, dehumanizing Eva and making her struggles feel insignificant to the Berlings. She makes it seem as if that class is almost subhuman. Mrs. Berling's tone is clearly dismissive, and this quote also reveals Mrs. Burling's ignorance and lack of compassion. By dehumanizing Ava and seeing her as a stereotype rather than an individual, Mrs. Burling symbolizes how those in power often view the working class. Priestley's use of condescending language reveals how wealth and privilege can distort people's sense of morality, suggesting that the upper class often fails to understand the consequences of their actions on others. This is Sheila Burling showing a moment of empathy for Ava in the working class. She starts to see past the economic view of people as labour and begins to understand that they are real individuals with their own lives and struggles. Sheila is arguably the most conscious or compassionate person in the Burling family, and she's standing up against her father in this scene. Sheila's shift in language here is significant. She moves from the dehumanizing term cheap labour, which echoes her father's capitalist mindset, to acknowledging Ava and others as actual people. This moment represents a break from her family's views and shows a growing awareness of social responsibility. The author is therefore using Sheila as a character who develops throughout the play, beginning to recognize the many injustices that are faced by the working class. Her empathy contrasts with the rest of her family, especially Mr. Burling, who sees workers only in terms of their economic value. Sheila's understanding serves as Priestley's critique of the rigid class system, suggesting that change is possible when the privileged begin to recognize the humanity of those who are less fortunate. Honestly, there's loads to go into when it comes to an Inspector Calls, so I'm gonna call this part 1 of the series. I hope you've enjoyed the video, whether you read for pleasure or you're studying this in your English classes at school. Please let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a part 2 of an Inspector Calls, or alternatively if you'd like me to cover any other texts. Just a quick announcement as well, I have a link in my bio where you can sign up for private but affordable GCSE mentoring. Just fill out the form and I'll get back to you in due course. All that being said, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.